Welcome to Tales from Tubi.
Hey Tubi friends! Welcome to a brand new episode of Tales from Tubi. For those of you new here, if you don't know what Tales from Tubi is, this is where I take my love of Tubi and my love of horror movies and I mash them together in this nice little package. All the movies that we talk about here on Tales from Tubi are available on Tubi at the time of recording. If you come to this later, hopefully they are still available there. We are in October now, and like I said last week, every Friday in October we're going to have a special guest. Last week you got to hear Gerald from Two Peas on a Podcast as we talked 1989's Intruder. This week I bring in another very special guest, someone I see as one of the hardest working men in podcasting. He has the Binge Movies podcast where he gives quick reactions, he gives reviews, he brings in guests, and we watch all kinds of movies on there. And sometimes we get bad takes on movies such as Pearl Harbor. But he also has another podcast he is co-host of called The Slashers, where he has to defend basically his love of slasher films. And it is so much fun. I want to welcome him in. Jason, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I didn't think that's what it was going to turn out to be, but it's at the very least it's me defending drive-in slashers, like the real low rent ones. So I guess I'm in the Brad position on that show.
You are, and I think that's why I love it. I'm just listening to it, going, "This would be me." Right there, if I was sitting here with this.
Yeah, as I dreamed this up a couple years ago, I never imagined when I recruited people that they'd end up abusing me. As a thank you for being able to be participate in this. The show's been very well received. It's a limited series. We're doing about 7 or 8 episodes. As this comes out, there's probably about 3 or 4 episodes out. It's been very, very, very well received. So it's nerve-wracking when you're doing something new and different, and you put it out there into the world, and it's finding its footing. There's 3 of us. We've never podcasted together, really went into it completely cold. Paul from The Countdown is on there, and he and I have been podcasting together for almost a decade, but not in this way with a show together. So
I can't wait to hear more of it because I am enjoying I don't want to say I'm enjoying them teaming up on you sometimes, but it makes for a very entertaining episode.
Yeah, that's probably the 2 great compliments that we've been consistently receiving. Either they really enjoy me defending slasher movies. Hey, thanks for sticking up for, death screams or something. And I'm like, yeah, you got it. Or it's, yeah, I really enjoyed seeing you get whipped, hearing you get whipped. And I'm like, oh gosh, okay. And then, the other praise to get is just that it's not an exhaustive show, but it's a pretty comprehensive show. And so many great horror podcasts, this one included, that are out there, or podcasts with horror enthusiasts. I think every podcaster is a movie podcaster is like a closet horror fan.
Absolutely. There's so many podcasters I've met in this world that they have that itch of I want to do more horror. I want to do more horror. I don't want to do just Oscar movies or just this.
Correct.
And I dig the bottom of the barrel. So
yes, you do. Yeah. And so we're going through the golden age of horror, slasher horror films in particular. And we've regarded that as 1980 to 1984. Yes, we understand the 70s and whatever. And so it's like a little bit of history. I would say it's a comprehensive survey of the slasher boom, 80 to 84. We're not going through one slasher at a time. We're doing it a year at a time. There's possibilities aplenty to do more, but it's really dependent upon this first season, getting the listens, getting the downloads, getting the reviews, whether they be positive or negative, but just getting feedback. And there being an appetite for another one, because we're all 3. This is all of our side gig. We have a full-time, legitimate, film critic, who's on the show, myself, who I guess is the cult movie defender and enthusiast, and then there's an Australian. So we have all the diversity you could ever want, I suppose.
I will say, if anyone's listening to Old Man Brad, go check out the slasher. So hopefully we can get
got my plug in real early, Brad. Thank
more
you.
than a second season. Yeah, we're getting it right at the top of the show. That way they're not like they haven't given up by now. We're like, yeah.
That's right.
This is where they put all the stuff in. I can turn it off.
I can turn it off now. Yeah.
But this week we're I don't even know how to define this movie.
Jesus Christ, Brad.
I don't know what side of the fence you land on this one, but we're talking Neon Maniacs from 1986, or as it was originally released, Evil Dead Warriors.
They think they're going to live forever.
What are you doing? Wants to fool around.
But they're in for a terrible surprise. Now, there are 12 new reasons
Over here!
to be afraid. Introducing, in diabolical order, Axe, Hangman, Dog, Biker, Slash, Juice, Samurai, Mohawk, Archer, Soldier. These are the Neon Maniacs. They live so others may die.
In the spirit of your show, I watched this in the most impossibly dark transfer that's on Tubi. There's another transfer that's out there.
It was a rough one, yeah.
On Blu-ray that is way more legible than this. So I had to watch this thing twice because the one on Tubi is a VHS rip, more or less. It is a 4:9 standard definition.
Yep.
So dark I couldn't see anything. I think there's a ton to see that's worth seeing. And for those that don't know me, who are just in the Brad universe, Brad Fest, Old Man Brad universe of things, I have the potential to like, I should say, this sort of obscure crapola from yesteryear. And I have grown to enjoy this subgenre of like half-baked movies that have been forgotten to time that you would have rented by just out of curiosity because the box looked cool.
Oh, yeah.
In 1991 and then got it home like, what the fuck is this?
This probably would have been one of those.
And some movies in that category are actually, you end up watching them and for what they are and their budget level, everything, they're actually pretty good, right? Obviously, I'm preaching the choir. I'm saying it to you.
But the listeners might not all know that.
That's right.
They just go, oh, yeah, Brad watches this kind of movie.
Yeah. Or at least they have like interesting outside the box sort of ideas, even the movie's not good. It's like stuff you wouldn't have seen in Hollywood movies even back then. For me, so much of it all comes down to like the inventiveness of the people working on the film. And if you told me, hey, somebody in the 80s kind of made, because I'm sure we'll get into it in the conversation.
Yes.
A slasher movie, which like a accidental mashup of a slasher, Monster Squad, and the Garbage Pail Kids movie.
That's actually a pretty good way to put it.
And it's on Tubi for free. I would be like, where is this? I need to see it right now because all of those things speak to me. And then I watched the movie.
Yeah. Well, let's I'll give a quick synopsis of the movie before we start to dig into it. A group of teenagers in San Francisco discover a nest of homicidal monsters living in a tower of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Why is it a nest?
I don't know. But when they tried to tell authorities, no one believes them. That's the synopsis for this movie.
That's a other than them saying nest, I don't know why it's considered a nest. It's a pretty good synopsis.
It's like a shipping container. Let's just
Yeah. It's like a bread truck or some shit when they finally get to it, or ice cream truck or something, and then they open up the back and it's a portal to another dimension, but it's under the San Francisco Bridge or Golden Gate Bridge or wherever it's at.
But I'm just gonna say right off the bat, I'm not gonna say we're gonna give any spoiler free. We're just gonna go right into it. We're probably gonna spoil whatever this is. if you care about that thing. But with this movie, you shouldn't have to care about that because it's a mess. Let's just say that. And it was a very troubled production mess too.
Oh, yes. To say you can tell it is a troubled production while watching it. Oh my God. I don't even know. Honestly, this is the most daunting podcast experience I've ever had. I don't get nervous so much anymore. I have been so nervous about doing this episode because I'm like, I don't know how to talk about this movie.
There really isn't, I don't think, a straightforward for sure way to talk about this movie. You just kind of have to, I don't know, just talk
You've
about
titled
things.
this, you've titled our gathering here together, our fellowship time, as Brad and Jason try to make sense of Neon Maniacs.
Correct.
And we've both watched plenty of nonsensical horror film in our day, right?
Oh yeah.
And it's not just that it's nonsensical, which it is, but it's also that it is quite literally an unfinished film.
It is. Like it literally
there is no
just
end.
ends.
It just stops.
And Jason,
Because they ran out of money multiple times.
yes, they shut down for months at the beginning.
And so like I wrote in my little notebook, I'm like, okay, the only thing that explains this movie, and this is like a fourth of the way into it, is as if they didn't have enough money or time and production stopped. So I watched it all the way through. Didn't look up anything. Didn't watch any video essays, didn't read any Wikipedia articles, didn't find any oral histories of Neon Maniacs, or didn't go to Bloody Disgusting and read any, didn't go to Fangoria and look at archive stuff, did no research. The movie ends. I start doing some research. Two things were immediately clear to me pre-research. I feel like whoever directed this has basically TV level direction skills because it seemed like a TV show.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, for sure.
They didn't have any money. And it felt like a first-time writer. Come to find out the director is Joseph Mangine, who did most of his work in TV, but he was the cinematographer for Alligator, The Sword and the Sorcerer, Alone in the Dark, which is a slasher I'll end up covering, and a 1980, the year 1980, slasher Mother's Day, which we're not covering this time around, but it's possible if we do another one, we'll cover it. And the thing about all of those movies, and Alligator is actually a pretty good movie.
It is a pretty good movie.
The thing about all of those movies is they're ugly as shit.
Yeah.
The cinematography, Alone in the Dark actually isn't so bad. Alone in the Dark isn't so bad. But the cinematography on The Sword and the Sorcerer and Mother's Day and Alligator, not great. And most of his direction experience, he did a lot of directing of TV, didn't direct very many movies. The writer is Mark Patrick Carducci. This is the first thing he ever wrote. And he only wrote a handful of things. The next thing, or not next thing, but the biggest thing he ever wrote was Pumpkinhead.
Which was a little bit better than this one.
Yes, right. And then the next thing I find out, so I'm like, okay, first-time writer, really kind of a TV, mostly director, cinematographer, mixed bag at best, his filmography. So that makes sense. That's why this movie doesn't look very good, and that's why it is so sloppily written and whatever. And then I'm like, they just had to have run out of money. And that's before I even got to the end. And then come to find out, the production was halted several times.
Yeah, right at the beginning.
Months at a time.
And there were multiple people who played the Maniacs.
Yes.
You could definitely tell, for sure. Like, you could tell that there were issues with this film. I mean, it just ended. There were even, I think I even wrote that there were some voiceover scenes. Like the one in the school, just like sending her home. I was like, well, they didn't shoot the scene, but they're like, hey, just come record something really quick. I have a scene of her walking. We'll throw a voice over top and it'll be good.
Yeah, it's really just like the joy of watching this would be just seeing a movie that isn't finished, that's barely taped together, that was just dumped, because that's what this movie ends up being. And so you end up with scenes like a bunch of teenagers who are all 45 years old.
Yes.
Go to a very public park in a van and just
they have a
drink and
party.
make out and loiter. And then the Maniacs just randomly appear.
But before that, let's not forget, the homeless guy that finds these trading cards, or
there's no explanation for the trading cards.
Or their headshots for modeling. I don't know what they
That's
were.
where it felt like Garbage Pail Kids, right?
Yeah.
So this homeless guy is walking by the nest for the Maniacs that's part of the bridge. Never mind the fact that the Maniac's only weakness is water.
Yeah, and they live by the water,
They
by
live
the Golden Gate
literally
Bridge.
oceanfront property under a bridge in San Francisco.
I've lived in San Francisco. It gets pretty wet down there.
Gets pretty wet. Yeah. He's just fumbling around, and then he finds all of these what very much appear to be hand-drawn cards that like homemade, like if somebody made off-brand homemade. It's like if you're raised by your elderly grandmother and she couldn't afford to buy you Garbage Pail Kids in the 80s, so she made you some herself so that you could be, well, just take these to school, I think, because no one will ever know.
It's like the same thing.
It's the same thing.
And right off the bat, you're just like, what am I in for?
Yeah. And there's no explanation.
No,
That's
nothing.
not a plot device that ever pays off or comes back.
Nope.
It's not as if they come out of the trading cards and then are alive and they're now in our world. No, it's just sometime later, teens are loitering in this park, and some of the creatures that we saw in those trading cards appear. And sometimes there's 4 of them, sometimes there's 12 of them. Sometimes it seems as if the people they kill become maniacs. Because like when they kill some cops, the next time we see them, there's a couple cop maniacs. Not Maniac Cops. It's a different series.
That's a whole different one.
But then other times the cops aren't there, and then you realize, because they never consistently had people playing these maniacs.
No.
Every role in the credits is filled by 8 different people. And so what we end up with is the continuity of this young girl becomes a lone survivor of a neon maniac attack. Some of them are humanoid. Some of them are basically like
the alligator Cyclops one. There's one that's a robot, I guess.
One that's a robot. One that's an alligator Cyclops. One that's a
samurai. Yeah,
one that's a samurai, and one that's just a Native American, a First Nations person. That's it.
They're like the village people. The village people monsters.
But it's like, wait a minute. You're supposed to be monsters, but some of you are just different ethnicities. Like, is Japanese a monster? Is Native American a monster? Is a caveman a monster? Like, it just makes no sense.
Yeah, 0 sense, because there's no backstory for who these creatures are. They live in this box, and then later
they live like in an ice truck or old timey bread truck.
Well, they live. In my research, I found that apparently there was more to the script. That apparently, from what people have said, that they're interdimensional creatures and they come through the truck. They're portholes in the truck and they come out. But I think that's why it's shell shining at the end.
Yes,
maybe someone's coming
that
through.
Was my
but
interpretation
we don't know that
because the cop, the detective who's investigating on this, does nothing the entire duration of the movie.
No.
Dies in the last 3 seconds of the movie. Because it's very clearly not the end of the movie, because then the teens are like, oh no, we're the only ones who can stop it now.
And then
we're going to go have to confront them. And then it just ends. Credits.
Yeah, it just ends. And you're just like, what?
They never filmed the third act. And so, you just end up with all this filler. But yeah, so it's like, okay, there's not a consistent idea of what these, like, okay, Monster Squad is basically no copyright infringement intended Universal horror monsters, right? Garbage Pail Kids are Garbage Pail Kids. They're a parody of Cabbage Patch Kids. So when you make a movie as bad as Garbage Pail Kids the movie is, they're bringing characters to life. We don't know who or what these things are supposed to be.
I felt like the alligator they just used. They were like, "Are you done with that costume over at the Garbage Pail Kids? Could we use it?"
And just... right. It's glued an eye to it. Yeah, so strange. It's so strange.
And then there's a battle of the bands right in the middle.
Well, I didn't even get to, like, again, this is why it's so hard to talk about. I'm sorry, Brad. I'm going to deliver.
No, we're just
ever. This is the worst episode in the history of this show. I'm so sorry to your listeners.
Well, this movie, like we stated at the beginning, there's no
linear story. It's just like a series of scenes.
I even put in my notes, I don't even know what year this is set in, because all the cops show up in 50s cars.
Correct. It's so strange. It's so weird. Okay. So my whole point was all of her friends get hacked and arrowed and hung and strangulated.
Yes.
Macheted and killed and all slashed to death, right? They're all slaughtered. She goes to the police station to give her report of why she's the lone survivor. And they don't believe her, as the synopsis you read said. The authorities don't believe her. So then she goes home and decides that the best way to get her mind off of all of her friends dying earlier in the evening
I can't even.
is to strip down to her underwear and go for a swim.
Let's go to the pool.
Let's just go to the pool,
Take a little swim.
get it off of our minds. It's insane.
And then it starts raining blood. But then
Which
it's a
ends up being
dream sequence.
Yes, yeah. Now, the raining the blood thing was actually kind of cool.
There were some of the effects in this movie that were kind of
Yeah.
cool. Some of the practical work was cool. It's like, well, there's all your money. It's gone.
Okay, so let me back up for like just dragging this movie. This, on paper, a movie called Neon Maniacs
Mhm.
that was very earnestly written, directed in the 1980s and has been forgotten to time
Yeah.
with lots of fog and neon lights and interdimensional slasher monsters who come out and attack people. Could be a recipe for a great cult classic film.
Oh, it absolutely could. I could, if this was finished, I
Yeah.
think if this was finished to what the extent it was supposed to be,
Yeah.
there was a possibility this could have been one of those movies that people talked about. Now they talk about it for a different reason.
It could have been potentially so bad it's good.
Yes.
It could have potentially just been like a good B movie.
Yeah.
It's so bonkers, but it's so 80s, because it's like kind of Killer Clowns from Outer Space kind of a feel. And again, kind of Monster Squad, kind of a slasher movie.
Mix
what
of
if
so much.
what if Garbage Pail Kids was a slasher film? Like, that's kind of interesting. They're not kids, but like sort of like these grotesque creatures and random other real ethnicities, which is horrifying to think about. But what if these grotesque creatures from another dimension came to life out of trading cards and started terrorizing local teens in the 80s? Like, and everything was splashed in neon, and like that's could be cool. What we have here is so unfinished and so just pasted together that it's not. Maybe if I revisit it, I would. Now that I know what I'm getting myself into, I'd be able to have that autonomy and that freedom
Maybe.
to laugh at it. But I'm not sure that I will. I think it's so undone. It's not even so bad it's good. It's more of a curiosity than anything.
Like, could it be one of those where, we're going to have some drinks and get some friends together and we're going to throw in Neon Maniacs and just...
Only I think if they're unaware. Like if you're in on the fact
on the
that
joke,
this is that this movie's basically only like a quarter completed, like because between what they didn't film, like, this climactic thing or this explanation for the entire movie, we didn't film it. And the ending, we didn't film it.
We didn't get
and
there.
then the stuff we filmed, we half-ass filmed. Like, if you're the only one in the room who knows that, or me and you and a bunch, we sicked this upon innocence at like a film festival, then maybe, if you had the right group of people in the right conditions and you're in on the joke, I think it could be entertaining.
Well, this was a movie that it's been on my list for a while just because of the artwork.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
And I recorded with Brett from Dissect That Film, and he was like, "Oh, dude, you got to watch it. You got to watch Neon Maniacs. It's wild." And I was like, "All right, I'll check it out," not knowing that it's not a complete movie. And I was like, you know what? I know a person that I could get to watch this with.
Okay, so here's another positive thing I'll say about it. So I then eventually found a Blu-ray transfer of it because there's a Blu-ray of this out there. Watching a Blu-ray version of it, much better looking.
Okay,
much better looking. I'm pro Tubi, but I would say avoid the version of this that's on Tubi.
I've come across a few movies that have been like, I'm like, I don't think I can watch this because it does. It looks like someone just took it off a really old VHS tape and was like, let's throw it up there.
Like when the 25-year-old, who's I think supposed to be 12 years old, the girl with the backwards baseball cap.
Oh, yeah.
They got a grown woman. A grown
and she's
woman.
a aspiring filmmaker.
Horror filmmaker.
Yeah.
Yes. And then they had her with another guy who is a grown-ass man who has the same age as all the other teenagers in this movie. So they're well into their 40s. They're like, okay, you guys are 17 and 18, and you two are 12 and 13
Yeah.
years old.
You're
You're the
younger
younger
than them.
brothers. Yeah. You're at best freshmen. And they're
Yeah.
at the exact same age. And she's like just a grown woman with a backwards baseball cap.
I mean, that's how you make younger.
Going,
Isn't that what they did with Saw 10? They just
yeah.
put your hat backwards. You're
It's
younger.
true. Oh, gee. I'm going to make a horror picture. It was just
Let me get my camera.
What? Let me get my camera. Do you want to be in my horror picture? It was so strange. When she goes to the bridge and she sees them coming out, randomly there's some zombies with them for a while. The Maniacs also have some zombies. Yeah. I don't know if the zombies are their victims or what the zombies entail, but the zombies are meeting the Maniacs at the Maniacs nest, and one of the zombies, because it starts to rain, falls into like the puddle, or maybe he just trips and falls. He
trips and fell into a puddle.
Yeah, he starts like
and
melting and smoking or whatever, right? And Tubi, it's illegible. It's like you have the vaguest sense of what's happening. But in the Blu-ray, you actually see the makeup effects, and you see like this neon green hand that's like melting in real time and all this sort of shit.
And I will say that's the biggest positive I came from this movie is that their practical effects were very well done.
It's very clear that whatever money they had, it all went into these suits. It all went into these characters. It all went into, chopping off limbs and this, that, whatever. Yeah. And there was nothing left for directing, lighting, editing.
I wonder if the Battle of the Bands, like they decide to go through with this Battle of the Bands at the high school.
Oh my God.
And they know the Maniacs are coming.
It's not just that they decide to. The teenagers are like, oh my God, the Maniacs are going to kill all of our friends. And the dude is like, no.
We'll get squirt guns.
The safest place to be is to have all of us in one place since we know they're coming for us. And now nobody else in the high school knows these Maniacs even exist. No. Since we know, we'll give everybody squirt guns. And then when the monsters show up to kill them, we'll all just shoot them and take them out. So when the monsters do show up and start absolutely slaughtering this Battle of the Bands school dance, because nobody else at the school dance even knows that these Maniacs exist. No. The dude gets on the PA, is like, everybody, don't run. Just use your squirt guns. Yes.
And then she grabs a hose. What if you know they're coming?
Have
the hose ready.
This is when we say squirt guns, children of the internet. This is pre-Super Soaker.
Yes, these are like the little 25-cent that you might get 3 squirts out of.
3, so they have given everybody these little piss shooters.
Yes,
you might
to fight the Maniacs.
Spit on the monsters to fight them. Yeah, and then one of them just has the hose. It's like, why don't you have the hose ready to go? Like the idea of like, we'll keep everybody safe by getting everybody in the exact locations the killers are going to come to, not forewarn anybody, and then hand them squirt guns. Like if hatchet wielding monsters broke into my high school gym, and I'm not stopping to go, well, that must be what this squirt gun in my hand is for. I am running for my life.
That's the last thing you're going to think of. Oh, I got a squirt gun. Maybe if I shoot them?
The blood of dozens of 57-year-old high schoolers is on the hands and heads of these other elderly high schoolers that are in this movie.
Do you think there really was a script? Because I know the deeper I read, like they've asked filmmakers, people involved in the film, and more often than not, things that I found is they can't remember or they forget, or some of them have passed away since. But
so when you go down the rabbit hole, like you go down the rabbit hole of this movie, right? Like most of the time when you find a cult movie or something like that, like sometimes people are reticent to talk about it, but you usually find groups of people who are, especially in our day and age, because there's been a reappraisal of so many of these movies and Alamo Drafthouse, and they have found a second, third life, and people have become kind of like little mini celebrities in the weirdo movie subculture that you and I traffic in, and so it's like even Monster Squad to some extent was a big flop when it came out.
Yeah, it was,
but it's
huge now.
Now the cast and crew eat off of that every year at conventions, and the same thing for like Troll 2 and Samurai Cop and so many of these movies. Whoever's still alive by the time they get discovered, they kind of end up, I don't know if they get rich per se, but they end up getting celebrated
Yes,
in
celebrated.
in the way they dreamed of years ago. You know?
Oh yeah.
But the people who worked on this movie, by all accounts, do not want to talk about it.
No, nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to acknowledge it.
So what happened to these people on this? I can't call it a set, but in the streets of San Francisco.
I don't know.
What was this production that there's not anybody that's like can kind of laugh and be like, oh my, Neon Maniacs, oh boy. Wow, I knew that was eventually going to come back. You know, that's usually the tone that some people say, like, oh man, let me tell you about Samurai Cop. Oh boy. But not these guys.
I mean, this feels like it'd be, Horror Hound here in Cincinnati, that the guy who played Samurai will be here, or
100%.
the guy who played, no, you get none of that.
None of it. Yeah. The final girl, it's like, oh yeah, I was in Samurai. Nothing. This is not what they are so deeply ashamed or traumatized by the making of this movie. And that just makes me more curious of like,
it does. I'm like, I need,
what happened to these people?
I need Screambox or somebody to dig in and give me some documentary on Neon Maniacs.
And again, it's been Blu-rayed.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's back in the public consciousness. It is one of those things that people do talk about it because it's such a curiosity, but none of the, when you find like, well, I talked to some people who worked in that production and they don't really remember what the script was. And so it does make you wonder of like, how did this guy get a script credit on this movie?
And was there really a full script when they started?
Was there really a script?
Because, I mean, one scene that I'm just thinking of, because it's in my notes, was when the cop starts riding the girl's bike, writing it down, and she's like, excuse me.
By girl, you mean the elderly woman?
Yes, the elderly woman.
Yeah.
He's riding her bike.
Ass cop on a very tiny BMX bike.
Like that right there was an improv scene if I've ever seen it.
100%. And then, because it's improv because they don't cut away.
Yeah, no.
And when the cop is like, she's like, I'll take my bike, thank you very much, and she rides away or whatever. And the cop is like, oh, I oughta. He's acting like he's gonna go for his gun and shoot this little kid. And then he kind of like, it's just like Samurai Cop, where it's just these long unedited takes, and he makes a real goofy face. And he just pauses because he's waiting for the director to call cut.
And he
doesn't. It never comes. And 15 more seconds goes by, and then it just cuts. And you're like, what the hell is this?
And same with the ooze. What is it? Whatever the ooze it's on the ground. Like they show it. It comes up maybe twice.
Oh, yeah.
Story. And then it's like they put it in a baggie, and then it might come up one other time, but nothing.
Like yes.
So many things that just never came back around. Like
trading cards never come back around. The ooze never comes back around. I totally forgot about the ooze.
I wrote in my notes, secret of the ooze.
The secret is, what is it doing there? What does that mean?
Where are the turtles?
Yeah. And they're like, we didn't find any bodies, or like we found this on the bodies or some shit. Well, because it's like the next morning after the park murders, for the final girl, the main girl, and they're like, yeah, we didn't find anything interesting, but we did find this slime, detective. Better get that analyzed. And it's like, that's it.
I think there was one other scene they mention it.
Doesn't one of the kids have some slime?
I think so.
One of the kids finds,
or they found some. Maybe it was when the one kind of melted, is in the water.
Yes, There's some kind of, and they end up having like a jar of it or something.
See,
but it doesn't mean anything.
The title of this recording is saying we're trying to make sense of Neon Maniacs is perfect.
I'm sorry, because like this is my wheelhouse, and I feel like I'm doing a shit job. But I've never quite seen anything like this because it's not consistent enough to be so bad that you're like laughing from scene to scene to scene.
Mm-hmm.
Because like some of the scenes are like, for what they are, they're like kind of competently done. Like the subway chase sequence, right? Yeah. Where they end up being chased through the subway and the maniacs. It's like, in theory, that's kind of a cool scene, right?
Where there's moments where you're like, oh, I could get into this. And then it does something else. You're like, what? Okay. And then it comes back to, like, I think it's during the Battle of the Bands when the doctor one comes and has this whole scene, which is played by Andrew Divoff, by the way, as his screen debut. That scene, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then it goes off and does something random after that. Like, that's why I wonder. It's like, here, we have this page of script that we're going to keep on, but I don't know what we're going to do next.
It almost feels like that, right? It almost feels like somebody's cousin had access to like a prop warehouse and are like, hey, these suits fell off the back of a truck. And so they're like, oh shit, like what could we make? We don't have anything but these suits. What could we do with it? All slashers are really popular. Yeah, they're all monsters. What if we made a movie with a menagerie of monsters and they're all maniacs, and they're all slasher villains and they go around killing teenagers? I was like, okay, yeah, because you could get people to work real cheap back then, and get some women to take their tops off and you go out and you shoot it kind of guerrilla style. Then somebody got ambitious and was like wanted to add lore to it of like, well, why are they all monsters or why are some of them monsters, some of them just people? But it's like,
how do they have one? Why is one a robot? Why is one
what it is?
Lizard?
Yeah, it kind of feels like a haunted house.
Yeah, it would have been perfect like setting.
No theme whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you have a haunted house that just has random fucking haunt actors and random like, oh, he's the crazy evil surgeon who does unnecessary surgeries on you, right? That's that guy, right? And it's like, okay, so then you go through the scene and he's ripping somebody's heart out and they're screaming, ah! And then you turn the corner and there's a weird alligator with a machete and an eye, and you're like, whoa! But that's like kind of what the vibe of the movie is.
Oh, it is the whole way.
Except for the fact that it then spends most of its time getting bogged down in like this teen girl's love life after her friends are dead. Because at one point the guy's just like, "Do you want to go out on a date?" Natalie or whatever her name is. And Natalie's like, "Yeah, let's go out on a date." And it's like, what the fuck? You're being chased by maniacs. They end up having sex at the school dance.
He was the guy at the beginning that they made fun of.
Yes.
And then he comes back and like, oh, they're all dead. So now I can just move right in.
Yes.
Nobody's going to stop me.
Yeah. They consummate the relationship after the maniacs have broken into the Battle of the Bands. The scene is them running down the hallway of the school. They hide in a science room because they're running from the doctor or one of them, who knows. And cut to back to the dance. Everybody's panicking, still getting slaughtered. Cut back to them and they're fucking. They're going, wait a minute, what?
Well, it's the 80s.
The monster is right down the hall.
They're like, oh, wait, we haven't put a sex scene in this movie yet. It needs it. It's the 80s. Quick, like, just put one right here.
Sex scene. There's no real nudity to it.
No, there isn't at all.
Why is that in there?
I don't know. There's so much in this movie, Jason. I just don't know.
It honestly just feels like somebody fell ass backwards into some reasonably high-end costuming and then slapdashed, went to a bookie or a loan shark or something and got way indebted to the mob for a lot of money and thought, oh, I could shoot this for
I got this.
The suits fell off the back of a truck. We could shoot this for, $200,000. They got into like a week's worth of shooting. It was like, hey, we need more money. And they're fucked. And and then they went and borrowed even more money from an even more dangerous mob boss, right? With like 1,000% interest. And like, we just got to get some return. They're gonna bust my kneecaps. That's what it feels like. So it's like, I gotta put the movie out because I gotta sell some tickets, or I'm gonna end up in Nevada desert.
Well, its original title, Evil Dead Warriors. They're like, well, Warriors was big. Evil Dead, people are loving that. If we put this title out,
that's a really good point, right? That's kind of
people might come.
That's another influence. That's a really good point. It kind of is like, what if because the Warriors, all the gangs, and the gangs have like pro wrestling themes. They're all whatever, baseball players, psychotic baseball players, or this, that, whatever. And so, what if you had like a little league team of ethnic people and monsters? Because again, apparently foreigners are monsters in the minds of the folks who made this movie.
Apparently,
and even there, like I think it's just again what makeup they had access to.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's like, well, what can you do? I know how to make a caveman. Okay, well, I guess a caveman's a undead, evil dead warrior.
Ran out of money within the first couple weeks.
Yeah.
And then it was months before they could come back. And half those people they had made prosthetics for and face stuff, they were like, no, I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
You got to get somebody else.
Yeah, I'm not coming back. Yeah.
Who's going to play
Yeah.
Samurai now?
I don't want to oversell this as being like, oh, it's such a disaster. You'll have a wonderful time watching it. I really didn't. I didn't enjoy my time watching it. I didn't hate it, but it's like again, like a certain scene is like, well, this is almost good.
Yeah, because there was a lot where it's like, okay, I'm like you. I'm like, I don't want to sell it as to tell people like, oh my gosh, you got to see Neon Maniacs. You're going to love it. Some scenes. You will probably think some scenes are really cool, and that's what I thought. Like, oh, this is cool. This is cool. But overall, I was just like, what?
Some scenes are cool in concept where you're like,
Yes.
oh,
Yes.
I see what you're trying to do.
But they never got visualized all the way through.
Yeah, if you could have executed on that, it would have been so fucking rad.
Yeah.
And some scenes are so bad they're good. And some scenes are you can see where it would have been so bad. that is what makes this one so rare. Because normally, okay, you get a mediocre movie and you watch a scene, like even to this day, right? Like you go to the theater, you watch a movie and you go, I see where that could have been a great movie.
Yes.
Right? Or a good movie. Like it's an okay movie, but I see what they were going for and it just didn't quite come together. This is the rare movie where you have that experience, except for it's so bad it's good. That you're like, oh, I see where it could be so bad. It's good.
Yes.
But instead, it's like this is a whole new concept in film criticism, Brad. We're breaking it open right here on your show. It's coming to me in real time, so I don't quite know how to encapsulate it. It's a mediocre movie. You know, if you have mediocre movie and that's in the middle, and then you have like, good movies, and then you have great movies, and then beneath mediocre you have, subpar movies and like bad movies and terrible movies, and so bad it's good kind of.
Yeah.
It's like a paradox where it kind of shoots you back around to the top of the ladder.
I mean, we usually call it the ones that are really, really bad. Like, I'm going to watch a Z grade horror movie.
Yes.
Would you put this below that?
No, that's where it's because it has enough production value to where it's mediocre.
Yeah.
But it's so slapdash that you could see where it could be Z grade, but it isn't. So it ends up being it's like a negative universe, bizarro universe version of wow, that's like an okay movie where I could see it would be great. Instead, this is like not really an okay movie, but you could see where it could be really bad.
Yes.
If this scene just went a little bit further in that direction, this would be like a Samurai Cop, right? If you had a few more scenes of like a bike on a grown cop on a child's BMX, you'd be like, wow, this is to the point of absurdity. The movie never so completely tips over into absurdity that it's fun because it's absurd.
No,
and it never tips so far over into 80s cool aesthetic that it tips over into a good cult movie. Instead, it's just right there.
It teeter-totters.
Yeah.
The whole way through. It starts to lean one way and then it comes back the other, and leans the other way.
Touches of absurdity.
Yeah.
But it's never so absurd it's fun.
Yeah, no.
There's touches of a decent B movie, but it never is so consistent that it's like, oh, this is like a Night of the Creeps or something like that.
So if you were to give this
it's
a rating,
rare movie that fails as both a good movie and it fails at being a bad movie.
If you could rate this out of 5, where would you set on this?
I don't know that there's ever been is there ever been another movie like this in the history of movies that is just incomplete, utterly incomplete, and was actually released?
Not that I can remember off the top of my head. I'm sure there's plenty out there. I mean, I've seen movies that it just feels like it was thrown together, but it was a linear story
Right.
with an ending.
Right.
For me, I'd honestly, the same as the movie, I've teeter-tottered back and forth of like, where do I rate this? Because like the effects, and there are scenes that I really did like quite a lot.
Yeah.
But then there's others that I don't. And it's like, do I give it a really bad score? Do I give it a middle of the road score? Where do I go? I think I landed ultimately with like a 2, where I'm just like,
that's pretty low for you.
Okay.
That's low.
And
for you, that is low.
It's one of those, like, I did enjoy a lot of it. I don't know if I'd watch it again, but I might. It's one of those like,
I'm right there with you because it's like, would watching it again help?
maybe I need, because I only watched it on Tubi.
Would I be able to just laugh my ass off at it a second time around?
So maybe I need, a little better, like the Blu-ray. Find a Blu-ray, see if it's a little more enjoyable to like actually see the effects and see what happens.
Yeah. I will say like the Tubi experience, and the thing about Tubi is like I said, I'm a supporter of Tubi, and a lot of the stuff that Arrow remasters and puts out, well, the Arrow version of it finds its way to Tubi. They have some kind of license agreement together. And same thing with like Full Moon or whatever. Even though Arrow and Full Moon have their own streaming service, they also farm out their stuff to Tubi. It's oftentimes for some really off the wall, low grade 80s horror movies. It's oftentimes a good source to even see if you're thinking about getting the Blu-ray, at least beyond a VHS transfer, so you can kind of see.
Yeah.
Especially if it's Arrow. If it's an Arrow movie, they have kind of a downgraded, compressed version of the Blu-ray file on there. This is real bad. Like the copy of Video Violence which was a shot on Shitio homemade horror movie. Have you ever seen Video Violence?
No.
Add that to your list, Brad.
Okay, I'm writing it down right now.
It is a movie about a video store shot in the actual 80s on video. It's a horror movie.
Okay.
By like people who ran a video store.
Can picture what quality it's going to be in my head.
Yes. You'll know it's Video Violence because there's a second one. The second one I'd skip, but the first one is because it's like a very bloody, like gnarly arm putting a tape into one of those giant ass old VCRs.
Okay.
It's from probably like 83, 85, 86, somewhere in that range.
We had one of those big ones growing up.
Yeah.
So
Video Violence. So the score for this,
what would you give it? If you could nail it down. I know it's tough.
2.5.
Okay.
2.5. If it's only at a 5, probably 2. I think I'm right there.
Okay.
Maybe a rewatch of it would make it 0, or maybe it'd make it 4. I don't know.
I don't know. Like, I could see this movie. I don't hit the bars and stuff like I used to when I was younger. So you'd go to those bars and they always have movies playing on TVs.
Yes.
Like, I feel like this would be one of those movies that's just playing while
like,
people are at the bar, and you just look up like, what is this? I'll give you another drink.
Yeah. Yes. like the sequence in the subway where they're being chased. God damn, I know you're trying to wrap this up. But I gotta exercise this demon. This Neon Maniac is in my spirit.
Can we sneak this movie into the slashers somehow? I want Paul to watch this movie.
Yeah, if we do the second, I mean, it's a slasher.
1986.
Yeah, if we do a second half of the decade, maybe. But that means I have to watch it again. Yikes! I don't know. Bombard Paul from the countdown. If you're listening to this, if you know who he is, with telling me he needs to watch Neon Maniacs. Could you imagine? The movie makes a bad miscalculation. I don't know if you noticed this. Like, it takes itself pretty seriously.
Yes,
like the monsters and everything, until the subway scene, which could almost be a cool scene.
Yeah,
and then like the samurai, that the caveman and the mummy and or whatever the fuck, they're getting upset because they can't get past the turnstiles.
Yes.
Because they don't have money.
I forgot about that one. And
then the samurai or the robot.
Well, the samurai was going to cut it.
Yeah.
And he stopped him. And then he shocked it.
Yes.
And then
the robot hacked the turnstile.
And then he had the train booth guard guy wanted to stop him, and he's just like, whatever.
Yeah. And so he shocks the turnstile so then the monsters can get through without having to pay. There's nobody on this train except for the boy and the girl. She's like, "Oh, are you sure we're going to be safe?" And he's like, "Don't worry. The only people in the train, it's just us and the conductor. We're perfectly safe." Then it cuts to the conductor car, and the robot gets behind him and is frying his brain with his hands. He's electrocuting him with his hands. And I think the miscalculation is, if you're going to go goofy,
just go for it.
Sight gag monster humor, you have to introduce that way in advance. Okay, establish that they're real monsters, make them scary, whatever. Yeah. But then you have to have kind of a dark sense of humor pretty early on.
Like, they could have thrown a few gag jokes into the death scenes at the beginning, and just some little things in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Monster Squad's a perfect example because the monsters are never not scary. They feel like a threat to those kids. Mm-hmm. at the same time, there you get sight gags like the mummy and the getting unwrapped and the
Wolfman's got nards.
Wolfman's got nards and he gets blown up and whatever. There's even some jokes at Dracula's expense or whatever. And so you're like, okay, like you got to be able to play that right. Or you have got to not do any humor whatsoever. Because if there could be this like serious monster movie where like there are these neon interdimensional zombie monster slashers are going to come and kill you, and okay, then it's got to be serious. But to just be like, again to your point, be like, what do we do for this scene? Well, what if, I don't know, what if it was funny?
Yeah.
And just have a couple of random funny scenes thrown in. It's like, this isn't a movie. This is almost like a bunch of concepts in a blender.
The whole movie was that way.
Yeah, the whole movie is of the most random ass haunted house. Why is it raining blood right now? Don't know. You know, like you go to Halloween Horror Nights, the theming is pretty consistent, right?
Yeah.
You know, room to room, it's telling a story, and it's progressing, it's linear, it makes sense. And this is like Uncle Chucklefuck's horror hut. That's just like some guy's like, wouldn't it be scary if a surgeon ripped your heart out? Wouldn't it be scary if a Native American shot you with a bow and arrow? And you're like, well, those two things have to do with each other. Wouldn't it be scary if a robot fried your brain?
Like an anthology, but it's all the same movie. Instead of different stories tying together, it was like, we're just going to throw all these stories into one movie.
It's an anthology from scene to scene, except for it's all the same movie and all the same fucking characters.
Yes.
What a disaster. This is a disaster, right? This movie?
Yes. I mean,
unmitigated disaster. And not The Room is a disaster, but there is
in a different
story.
way.
The Room is circular, but it's also, it ends up being kind of linear. It's just that the scenes are circular.
This movie is a mess, but it is like, as we talk and just talk through the nonsense of it, it's one of those like, you know, a year or 2 years from now, I feel like I should come back and watch this again just to see,
knowing that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, knowing
it can't make sense.
Yeah, and there's it's just going to end.
Yeah, there's not enough here to put together and be like, oh well, it's kind of badly done, but here's what the movie was about. I don't know what this was about.
No, there were monsters
killing random ass people who were allergic to water.
40-year-old high schoolers playing in bands. All right. Any last things you want to say about this before we wrap things up?
If somebody responds and goes, I love Neon Maniacs, it's so bad it's good, I wouldn't fight you. I'd be like, I believe you.
I guarantee this has its fans.
Yeah. So, I know it does. If somebody's like, Neon Maniacs is the worst movie I'd ever seen, I'd be like, I believe you. I'm so sorry, Brad, for my appearance on this show. I feel like I so underdelivered for Neon Maniacs.
I don't think you underdelivered at all, because as I was watching this last night, I was like, this is either going to be a disaster and we're only going to talk for like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Or this is going to be fantastic and we're going to break the hour mark, which we've just hit.
Okay. All right. We'll leave it to the audience to decide.
Might be the longest episode I'll ever have. You know, I like to get to the point and move on, but
not me, buddy. I like to get to the point and then get to the same point 4 or 5 more times.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on and chatting this random ass movie with me.
Watch Waxworks 1 and 2 instead of Neon Maniacs.
Yeah, those are both.
You get the
movies.
same menagerie of monsters killing teenagers,
but it makes more sense.
It's got the guy from Gremlins in it.
I mean, we gave a big spiel at the beginning, but you can tell everybody where they can find you. I guess we didn't get to that part of it.
Yeah, my main show is Binge Movies, and I've been doing that in some variety, in some form, some fashion. It is the only movie review podcast that emanates from a video store. In fact, the last video store in the universe. If your universe has a video store, then I simply am not in your universe. It's myself, filmmakers, film fans, film fanatics, film reviewers, folks like Brad. Come on. We typically talk.
I almost broke the show one time.
We typically talk about 5 films. We rank them, and then it's all in the purpose of trying to determine which one movie per season is most worthy of preservation for all time, even beyond the end times. There's a whole lot of stuff that doesn't make sense beyond that, but you really gotta listen to the show. The thing that I always say is that it's not for everybody, but the people it's really for. And I've been very fortunate through the years to have developed a great, very, very supportive listener base, most of whom I never hear from all around the world. And we've got some very encouraging third-party stats at the start of this year, end of last year. We've got listeners truly around the world, which is just staggering to me. And we're probably more successful everywhere else but the United States. But every once in a while, Binge Movies will find itself in the top 200, 150. Last couple of weeks from the point that we're recording this, top 75 of all TV and film podcasts. Fucking millions of those. I cannot be thankful enough for the people who listen and support the show. And Brad is one of those people. So thank you very much, Brad. Thank you for having me on your show.
No, thank you for coming on. I'm so happy that, I decided to start a different venture to where I can start doing more of this type of thing. So,
buddy, I got a list of some of the absolute shittiest Z-grade horror pictures in the world. So anytime you're like, hey, you want to come back on? Do you have a movie we could talk about?
Next time, I'll try to find one that has a linear story that we can make sense beginning to end.
Yeah. Again, though, okay, this is my last thing, and I'll let you finish your show. I wanted this movie to be a hidden gem.
Oh, I absolutely did. Yes.
And I think that maybe I put too much pressure on it.
Possible, because I think I was the same way. Because you look at that cover,
it looks so cool. You're like, whoa! Yeah.
You're like, this is gonna be a train wreck and amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, it had the train wreck in there, but I don't know if it hit amazing.
Yeah. So 2 years from now, Halloween time, 2025, we'll come back and do Neon Maniacs Reheated.
I'm all for that. We'll do a recap, a revisit,
a re-examination.
Yes,
yeah. Where we wrong? I'm down for it. I'm being serious.
Mark it down.
You mark it down. This is your show.
Oh yeah. Okay. I'll mark it down.
I know I've been hosting, but this is your show.
Well, thank you again. Brad. And like I said, we're in the middle of October right now. You're getting this on October 13th, Friday the 13th. What a perfect episode for Friday the 13th. But keep it right here. Next week, I will be talking with Drew from the Real Feels podcast. We're going to talk The Demon's Rook from 2013. And then finishing off October, I'll be talking to David from We Watch a Thing. We're going to talk Deadly Manor. So make sure you subscribe to the show so you never miss any of these. And subscribe to Binge Movies and The Slashers. They're both amazing shows. Snuggle up in that blanket, turn off the lights, because it's okay to be scared. We'll talk to you later, everybody.